Superheroes. They are the titans of the world. They can leap over tall buildings, fly, and even shoot lasers out of their eyes. Many generations have watched in wonder as these characters have persevered even under the most precarious positions. But what makes us come back over and over again? Surely we could never relate to a man of steel or an Amazonian demigod. That thing is humanity. Even though Batman is a badass when facing criminals, his history of losing his parents at a young age always comes back to haunt him. There's an entire plot in The Flash where Barry Allen learns the consequences of going back in time to save his mother. Since 2013, the DC Extended Universe has been creating live-action movies for various superheroes, and for the most part, they have been successful. Let's take a look at these movies and see what worked and what didn't. Man of Steel was released in 2013. Unlike previous films, this movie had many DC Comics references including Wayne Enterprises, Batman's company, and Star Labs, the lab responsible for turning Victor Stone into Cyborg. It was hoped that the success of this film could be the launching point for many other movies based on their characters from DC Comics. Despite the film meeting mixed reviews, Man of Steel brought in $668 million, netting DC with around $42 million in net profit. Following this success, DC created Batman vs. Superman, but it was anything but a success. Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice opened in 2016 to a strong debut weekend, but it could not keep it up, which turned the movie into a box office disappointment. There are a few reasons for this. The biggest problem was pacing. There are so many times where the plot slows to a crawl and nothing happens, but I think the biggest reason that it flopped was because of the disservice that the writers did with the characters. If you watch Batman in any other media, you will see that he does not kill often, as it would not make him any better than the villains that he fights. However, in this movie, he kills so many people, and many do not have a good reason to be killed. At the same time, Superman's characterization in this movie does not give the character justice. In the movie, Superman is framed as the bad guy that good guy Batman is trying to defeat. There have been many times in the comics and shows that Batman and Superman have been at odds with each other, and usually their conflicts center on their different styles of defeating bad guys and how Bruce Wayne usually ends up blading Lois Lane. Furthermore, this movie did terrible in creating a setup for future films. This film introduced The Flash, Aquaman, and Cyborg, but their addition in this movie is very jarring and lengthens a film that already had difficulties in pacing. Despite these flaws, the movies continue. The next movie on the line? Suicide Squad. While this movie was in development since 2009, it didn't come out until 2016. Although it was a box office success, critically, it was a failure. Although the performances of many of the cast members were praised, there were many failures in this movie that caused it to fall flat. One of the biggest concerns is the whole premise of the movie. In this movie, the reason that the Suicide Squad is created in the first place is to defeat metahuman threats like Superman. However, the reason that it has to be a secret team isn't really clear. Wouldn't it make more sense to have the police or some other entity do that? Maybe get someone in contact with the League of Shadows or something. However, as mentioned before, one of the few positives of the movie is the performances of some of its actors and actresses, particularly of Margot Robbie's role as Harley Quinn. Despite the failure of this movie, things would start to go up for DC. I'll admit, I have a little soft spot for this movie. This movie was the first movie that me and my girlfriend saw together, so I'm sure I'm a little biased when it comes to this movie. However, critics and viewers alike enjoyed the pacing for this movie and enjoyed Gal Gadot's portrayal of the Amazon princess. There's just so much going on for this movie, but I think the strongest point of this movie is its characters. Diana Prince is portrayed as a naive princess that has to learn about the truth of wars while finding her inner strength to persevere despite a world controlled by men. Steve Trevor is written as an excellent foil character to Diana. He is an American spy that is realistic and knows of the horrors of war. There are many times that Diana does something that he doesn't agree with, but the conflict between those two is usually nothing more than funny banter. In what I believe is the most awe-inspiring part of the movie, Diana and the rest of the gang go to No Man's Land and find out that the troops there are at a standstill. Diana believes that she can help them gain some leeway, but Steve presses that it's impossible. It is a no man's land after all. To which she unveils her Wonder Woman outfit and proceeds to break through and liberate the village on the other side. The scene is beautifully made, and the background score is just the icing on the cake. There is just so much more I could say about this film, but this is a video on DC live action movies as a whole, so I'll leave it at that. During this film, Bruce Wayne sends Diana Prince a photograph of her and Steve, which segues into the next DCEU film, Justice League. The Justice League movie has an interesting history. Originally, Zack Snyder was set to direct this movie, but he left in May 2017 following the death of his daughter, and Joss Whedon was hired as an uncredited director. During his time as director, he reshot many scenes and made other changes which gave the movie a brighter tone and more humor than in the original plan. This film cost $300 million to make, putting it up there as one of the most expensive movies ever made, but it barely made it up in the box office, costing DC $60 million. One of the biggest critiques of this movie was the villain. Steppenwolf's motivation for carrying out his attack is written as nothing more than just because he can. When comparing this to the antagonist of Wonder Woman, it makes Steppenwolf seem like nothing more than a B-villain. The immense failure of this movie caused DC to focus less on ensemble films and more on films focusing on individual heroes. However, a little petition would come around to bring this movie into a different light. After the release of the original Justice League movie, an online petition was created to release the Snyder Cut of the movie, which received 180,000 signatures. This, along with the trending hashtag Release the Snyder Cut, caused Zack Snyder himself to confirm that there actually was an original cut of the movie, but it was up to Warner Brothers to release it. And release it they did. Eventually, the executives agreed to have members of the post-production team work together to finish the cut. They did, and on March 28, 2021, the cut was released on HBO Max under the title Zack Snyder's Justice League. This cut improved on a lot of the problems that the original had, mainly of its antagonist. In this movie, Steppenwolf is much more dangerous in the original, and he has a much better motivation to take over the Earth. Here, he owes Darkseid a debt of 150,000 worlds so that he can return to his home planet. There was also increased character time for heroes that were left in the dust in the original film. Despite the successes, the original film had left DC wary of making ensemble films, and they turned to making more films about individual heroes. But they will do so in due time. In all of the movies released so far, DC has kept pretty consistent with previous portrayals of characters when making the live-action films. However, this changed with Aquaman. Instead of picking a blonde-haired white man to fill the role, they chose Jason Momoa, who is of Native Hawaiian ancestry. I believe that part of the success of this movie came from the casting. The story of Aquaman is about a half-Atlantean named Arthur Curry that has to earn the trust of the people of Atlantis to be their king. There are multiple mentions of Arthur being called a savage, and I feel this hits closer to home when we see a person of color being called that, as it presents the reality that people of color have definitely faced in the past and may be facing in the present. Visually, this movie is amazing. As they are in the water for the majority of the film, massive visual effects had to be done in order for their hair to move in a realistic way. What I enjoyed most was the characterization of Aquaman by Jason Momoa. He portrays Aquaman as this jaded, grumpy man that just wants to help the people around him. Watching him transform and defeat King Orm is just so refreshing. All in all, this movie was a great success for DC, netting them $1.148 billion and getting praises from critics all over. With this success, DC then brought a different superhero into the spotlight, one that rarely saw much time outside of the comics, Shazam. Shazam as a character has an interesting past. Originally called Captain Marvel, DC had to change the name of the character because Marvel had beaten them to trademark the name Captain Marvel. Interestingly, the Shazam movie came out at the same time as Marvel's Captain Marvel movie in 2019. As far as I can tell, it was most likely just a coincidence that they came out in the same year. Shazam is about a teenager named Billy Batson that is chosen by an ancient wizard to take the helm of an old champion. And the way to turn into this hero? Say Shazam, of course. During the beginning of the movie, all Billy wants to do is find his mother, as he was separated from her 10 years prior to the start of the movie. However, during the middle of the movie, Billy finds out that his biological mother chose to abandon him and honestly doesn't want to have anything to do with him at the present time. This is a heart-wrenching reality that many people face. Although our parents should love and care for us unconditionally, not everyone has that privilege. While he has been searching for his mother, he had completely ignored his foster family, but it is through this experience that he learns that family can be whoever you want them to be. Compared to other DC movies, this movie was very lighthearted at times, but I felt that it matched, seeing that the main character was just a teenager. After this movie, DC would do something that they've been trying to avoid for many years: make another ensemble movie. 2020 was a difficult time for the entertainment industry. At one point, most things were shut down, and that included movie theaters. Birds of Prey was the last DC movie that was released before the shutdown that started to happen in March 2020. However, this movie was released on February 7th, giving it more than enough time to rake in money before movie theaters began to shut down. Yet it fell short of meeting the break-even point of $250 million. What happened? Was it bad characters, bad writing, or something else? One possible reason could be of the title. In whole, the title is Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn, but many places shortened it to Birds of Prey. Birds of Prey is not a comic series that is well known as Justice League or Guardians of the Galaxy, so casual moviegoers didn't even bother looking into the movie because they didn't know who was in it from the first 3 words of the title. At some point, Warner Brothers even asked theater websites to list the movie with the title Harley Quinn, Birds of Prey in order to capitalize on the popularity of Harley Quinn, but it wasn't enough. Despite the dismal box office sales, I did enjoy watching the movie, but I felt that many of the characters lacked much depth. They do try to dip into the traumatic backstory of Helena Bertinelli and how it shaped her into becoming Huntress, but much of the other characters didn't get the same treatment. Black Canary is just a burlesque singer that is stuck under Victor Zsa's reign, and most of the other characters of Birds of Prey received the same death. With another dismal ensemble movie failure, DC moved on to make its first sequel movie of the extended universe, Wonder Woman 1984. I'll be honest, I really wanted to like this movie. I probably came in with too much expectations, seeing that the 2017 Wonder Woman movie is still my favorite movie out of the DC extended universe, but I really expected more out of this movie. Wonder Woman 1984 is set in, surprise, the 1980s, where Diana Prince works at a museum while she secretly performs her Wonder Woman duties. At the museum, Maxwell Lorenzo steals one of the stones, which has powers to grant users wishes. I think the concept of the Dreamstone is very fascinating and something that could have made for a great movie, but I think the execution was off. At the end, the only way to stop the Dreamstone's power is for everyone to revoke their wishes. At this moment, that meant that Diana had to revoke her wish of having Steve Trevor back. On its own, it was a very moving scene, but when paired with the original movie, it loses its impact as he was already killed at the climax of the first movie. One thing that I did enjoy from this movie was the friendship between Diana and Barbara and Minerva. Barbara is a shy, nervous cryptozoologist who just wants to be as cool as Wonder Woman. Seeing Barbara change throughout the course of the movie to meet that ideal is heartbreaking. At the end, she realizes that she gave up her caring personality to become a superhuman, and so she revokes her wish and turns back to normal. As far as I know, this is different from the origin story that is mentioned in the comics. In the comics, she gains her powers by drinking a potion that gives her the powers of Cheetah. Even though Barbara survives this movie, I doubt we will see her as Cheetah again unless they revamp her story, and it's a shame because it was one of the few highlights of this movie. Wonder Woman 1984 was released theatrically and on HBO Max, but was not able to break even. This may be most likely to movie theaters shutting down due to the pandemic, as this movie became the most watched straight-to-streaming title of 2020. With 2 back-to-back lackluster movies, DC would make another big gamble, bringing back the Suicide Squad. For the most part, James Gunn has his feet firmly in the Marvel Universe. He had directed all of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and he was an executive producer on 2 Avengers movies, which were all successes. So how did he become the director of a DC movie? In a way, it's because Disney kicked him off of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. In July 2018, controversial tweets that he made in the past began to circulate, and that caused Disney to kick him off of the movie. At the same time, DC was looking for another director for the new Suicide Squad movie, as the director for the 2016 movie was busy making Gotham City Sirens. He became the writer of the Suicide Squad the day after signing his exit settlement with Disney. Interestingly, Disney reinstated Gunn as director of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 a day after this, but the contracts were already signed, and Gunn eventually became the writer and director of the Suicide Squad. All in all, this movie was a great improvement on the original and a great movie in general. Even though this movie is very violent, there are enough jokes and lighthearted moments that it doesn't seem that bad. Despite this being an ensemble movie, the characters are fully fleshed out and each have their own motivation. One example is Peacemaker. Despite originally looking like nothing more than a douchey Captain America, we quickly find out that Peacemaker has an additional order from Amanda Wallace. Make sure that any evidence of America's involvement in Project Starfish is destroyed. This puts him at odds with Bloodsport and Rick Flag, and this conflict brings about the idea of levels of bad. In Suicide Squad, everyone has done things that are bad enough to land them in jail. However, that doesn't mean that they are a bad person. Even though Bloodsport went to jail for shooting Superman with a kryptonite bullet, he believed that America hiding their involvement in Project Starfish is something that the public needs to know. Having this nuance in characters is what made these characters feel human, even while they are busy finding creative ways to kill people. As of this writing, there are 4 DC films in development: Black Adam, The Flash, Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, and Shazam, Fury of the Gods. Each of them has the potential to be the next great or the next flop. But what I think will be a great indicator of the strength of the movie is its characters. In the best DC movies so far, the way that a character was written made it the difference between a mediocre movie and a great movie. Diana Prince was a wide-eyed, sheltered princess that had to learn about the reality of war. Harley Quinn had to learn how to become an independent woman after her breakup with the Joker. And Billy Batson had to learn what it truly meant to have a family. If characters are created with this thought of humanity in mind, then I have no worries that they won't do well. But only time will tell.